Wait, resume share. I'm so confused by um, the sharing things. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Are we almost ready, or should I have everyone hang out in the waiting room for a sec?
I think we're ready.
I'm good.
Okay, I'll start bringing them in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. As we are all starting to sign in, I am going to share with you our embroidery of the week. I'm very excited. We have a Prince mushroom, which I thought was really beautiful. The sad news is whoever returned it didn't put their name on the package, so I can't credit anybody. So when you send your embroidery back, if you'd be so kind to put your name, we would love to make sure that we credit you when we feature you. So this is this week's Prince Mushroom. And I am Jen Curtis, and I'm calling in from Studio City. And tonight I will be continuing on my underground pattern. And I use she, her pronouns. And while we continue to wait for people to sign in, if you want to, we'll just do informal introductions. So I will pass it over to Cascade.
Looks great, Jen. I'm Cascade, she, her pronouns, calling in from Rose, California. I'm still trucking away on my Common Raven. Haven't gotten very far, but excited to start again. And I, thank you, love. Trying. I will pass it to C. Morales.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina, she, they, them pronouns. I am a communications coordinator with Anahuacalmeca, Semillas del Pueblo in Los Angeles. I'm here today because I might be in the wrong place. I wanted to learn about fungi, and I see everyone showing your cool embroidery pieces. So if someone wants to clarify, that's totally cool. If not, I'm here to admire your art because so far it's really beautiful.
Welcome. You are so in the right place. We find that in this time of quarantine that we've committed ourselves to learning and mending together. So when we do our readings, we are offering to people to help us embroider all of the native plants and things that we're growing along the LA River. So that's why we're showing embroidery. But you're absolutely in the right place, and we'll get started with the reading really soon. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
I'm Lauren, by the way, she, her pronouns, calling in from Metabolic Studio along the LA River. And I'm also continuing to work on my underground pattern. And I pass it on to Ansu.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I stepped away for half a second to pull my embroidery out of the bag. I'm in Idlewild. My name is Ansu, she, her pronouns. And I, you know what? I have the book, but I'm not sure of the format. So I'm looking forward to tonight and getting into the mushroom book. I'm going to pass it on to Patricia.
I don't think we can hear you, Patricia. It doesn't look like you're muted though. Do you have a headset plugged in? Well, while she's figuring out those technical difficulties, I will pass it to Izzy.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Hi, my name is Izzy. My pronouns are she, they, and I have yet to start this new embroidery that I received of the root system. I'm kind of intimidated but excited. So we'll see what I do with this tonight. I will pass it on to let's see, Roxanne.
Hi. Oh wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm actually in transit, so I'm paying attention peripherally, but really excited once I can sit down and listen to everybody. And I'm in Venice Beach. And I can't see, so maybe Izzy, can you pass it to somebody else?
Yeah, no problem. I can definitely do that. Let's see, has Taz gone? Or maybe how about
I can go.
okay.
Thanks, Izzy. My name is Kaz, also Carol. My pronouns are she, her. Coming to you from Serrano land out in the Joshua Tree area of the Mojave Desert. I'm still working on my avocados. But I can't see either, like Roxanne. So is Caroline on the call?
He's not, but I can take it for now. My name's Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina, and I'm also part of the Metabolic Studio, and I will be working on this little bird. It's the yellow-rumped warbler, and I'm happy to be here. I will pass it on to Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha Wilhelm, calling in from Talent, Oregon, the Siskiyou-Klamath bioregion, home of the Shasta and the Tequilma, and later called the Rogue Indians. And I am still working on my my bat. It's going to take a while, but I'm really enjoying it. It's good to join with you tonight. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to, how about Aaron?
Hello, my name is Aaron, calling from Metabolic Studio, referred as he and him. Today I am working on cleaning up the studio a little bit and listening in. I will pass it on to Jaime.
Hey everybody, I'm Jaime, he, him pronouns. I am in the Owens Valley, Payahunadu. I work with the Metabolic Studio, and tonight I'll be sharing the screen with the reading. I'll pass it on to Rowena.
Hi everyone, I'm Rowena. I'm calling in from Mid-City, Los Angeles, Tongva land. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm working on a native bee, hoping to finish tonight. Good to see everyone. I came in late, so I'll leave the floor open to whoever hasn't gone.
Hi there, Emily here in Echo Park. Glad to be with you all and go on another journey through this epic book together. I'm working on some bread and maybe some sauce while I listen. Happy to be with you. Did my friend Cascade introduce herself? Okay, she did. So we got both Wilhelms introduced. Eco Art Space, Patricia, are you back? Can we give you a chance?
Yes,
All
somehow
right.
I was in some kind of weird place. Explain later. Patricia Watts, pronouns she, her, coming from Santa Fe, New Mexico, Santa Fe, Ogopoge, which means white shell water place. And I just got my new, well, it's been a week. I'm a little behind. I'm very excited. I don't know what it is. I got a picture of some things, but it doesn't seem to match up with what I have. So I'll just wing it like I usually do. Am I going to pick someone else, or am I the end?
I can go. This is Sri. Sorry, I came in late as well. Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you right now from North Carolina, the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kiawi and the Saura. And I am still also working on my B. I have a little neuropathy in my finger, so it is a more leisurely path that I take to finishing the B than a quick one. But I am very excited for the new embroidery because I used to do microscopy and I love the little images that I got. So I'm very excited to engage in that as well.
That's wonderful.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Well, welcome everyone. The Metabolic Studios Learning and Mending series is now in its 4th evolution. This time around, we are addressing disturbance ecology and what emerges in blasted landscapes of capitalism. To do this, we will be collectively reading Anna Tsing's The Mushroom at the End of the World on the possibility of life in capitalist ruins. Growing through the last 3 gatherings, the first learning syllabus in response to ongoing racial violence, particularly at the hands of the police, the second holding space for the mega fires that have consumed the West, and the third addressing the larger reality of suffocation and the need for us to revive our breath. In order to get a deeper understanding of these crises and how they're interconnected, we're building upon these readings in the last 3 series. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants representing food and medicine that Metabolic Studio is cultivating. We're adding some new embroidery patterns, and we have more native plants and birds available. The theme of all the embroideries we've been working towards is biocenosis. It is an association of diverse organisms forming a closely integrated community. If you haven't received your embroidery kit, or you would like to receive another embroidery kit, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. We've decided to close the Zoom entrance after the first 15 minutes of the reading to protect the flow and to keep a steady breath. These gatherings are being recorded through Zoom for archival purposes. We thank you for co-creating this opportunity to learn and to mend together during quarantine. Tonight, we'll read pages 167 through 176 from The Mushroom at the End of the World by Anna Tsing. This 10-week series will focus solely on one book, and our guiding question is, what lives in the ruins we've made? Since the ongoing pandemic began, we've moved our weekly public studio practice to Zoom, where we've committed ourselves to learning and mending together. We invite you to receive these readings as a deep inhale, and we find that crafting together helps to receive these readings as a meditation. We will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text aloud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Silence is golden, and there is no pressure to fill the transitional space while we enjoy a breath and continue crafting. Feel free to jump in and continue reading at your comfort level. You don't have to read, it's also fine to enjoy listening. And now we will begin the reading.
Okay, hi everybody, James here. Just wanted to start off with a little practice that we've been doing, which is introducing some of the reading questions before we begin reading. So I'm going to post it in the chat and read it. But this week's question is, what are examples you've seen of sporadic cycles of landscapes like pine seed and matsutake fruiting? And today at the end of the reading, we're going to try something a little different, which is breaking out into some breakout rooms and having discussions about these kinds of shared experiences. Okay. So here's the caption for the photo. Active landscapes, Lapland. When they saw me photograph these reindeer among pines, my hosts apologized that the ground was messy. This forest had recently been thinned, they said, and no one had time yet to pick up all the wood. Though such cleanup, forests come to resemble plantations. Thus, managers dream of stopping history. Chapter 12, History. It was September when I first saw the pine forests of northern Finland. I rode the night train from Helsinki past the Arctic Circle with its signs for Santa Claus's home, through smaller and smaller birches until I found myself surrounded by pines. I was surprised. I had thought of natural forest as packed with tall and tiny trees, all jumbled together, of many species and ages. Here, all the trees were the same, one species, one age, neat and evenly spaced. Even the ground was clean and clear, without a snag or a piece of downed wood. It looked exactly like an industrial tree plantation. Ah, I thought, how the lines have blurred. This was modern discipline, both natural and artificial. And there was contrast. I was near the border with Russia, and people told me that across the border, the forest was a mess. I asked what a mess looked like, and they told me the trees were uneven and the ground full of dead wood. No one cleared it up. This Finnish forest was clean. Even lichen was cropped close by the reindeer. On the Russian side, people said, great balls of lichen grew as high as your knees. The lines have blurred. A natural forest in northern Finland looked a lot like an industrial tree plantation. The trees have become a modern resource, and the way to manage a resource is to stop its autonomous historical action. As long as trees make history, they threaten industrial governance. Cleaning the forest is part of the work of stopping this history. But since when do trees make history? History is both a human storytelling practice and that set of remainders from the past that we turn into stories. Conventionally, historians look only at human remainders, such as archives and diaries, but there is no reason to not spread our attention to the tracks and traces of non-humans, as these contribute to our common landscapes. Such tracks and traces speak to cross-species entanglements in contingency and conjuncture, the components of historical time. To participate in such entanglement, one does not have to make history in just one way. Whether or not organisms tell story, they contribute to the overlapping tracks and traces that we grasp as history. History, then, is the record of many trajectories of world making, human and not human.
I'll go next. Yet modern forestry has been based on the reduction of trees, and particularly pines, to self-contained, equivalent, and unchanging objections. Modern forestry manages pines as potentially constant and unchanging resource, the source of sustainable yields of timber. Its goal is to remove pines from their indeterminate encounters and thus their ability to make history. With modern forestry, we forget that trees are historical actors. How might we remove the blinders of modern resource management to regain a feel for the dynamism so central to the life of the forest? In what follows, I offer two strategies. First, I delve into the abilities of pines across many times and places to change the scene with their presence and transform their trajectories of others. That is, to make history. In this, my guide is a book in the kind of a heavy tomb that when it slips off your bicycle on a turn makes a great clatter and smash stopping traffic. That book is David Richardson's edited volume, Ecology and Biogeography in Pinus. I'm not going to say the other way. Despite its heft and reserved title, it is an adventure story. Richardson's authors intimate the variety and agility of Pinus, making it a lively subject across space and time, a historical subject. This provocation convinces me that all of Pinus, rather than a particular kind of pine, would be my subject. Following pines through their challenges is a form of history. I'll read this last passage. Second, I return to northern Finland to follow pines into interspecies encounters and thus the assemblages of which they are architects. Industrial forestry comes back, but so too do those aggravations that reduce its success in stopping history. Matsuke helps me with this story, for without the efforts of foresters, they help pines survive. Pine flourishes only in the encounter. Modern forest management can grasp a moment in pine's history, but it cannot stop the indeterminacy of encounter-based time.
If you ever wanted to be impressed by the historical force of plants, you might do well to start with pines. Pines are among the most active trees on Earth. If you bulldoze a road through a forest, pine seedlings will likely spring up on its raw shoulders. If you abandon a field, pines will be the first trees to colonize it. When a volcano erupts or a glacier moves back, or the wind and the sea pile sand, pines may be amongst the first to find a foothold. Until people moved things around, pine grew only in the northern hemisphere. People carried pine and grew it in plantations in the global south. But pine jumped over the plantation fence and spread out across the landscape. In Australia, pines have become a major fire hazard. In South Africa, they threaten the rare endemics of the fynbos. In open and disturbed landscapes, it's hard to keep pine down. Pines need light. In the open, they can be aggressive invaders, but they decline in the shade. Furthermore, pines are poor competitors in what are usually considered to be the best places for plants. Plants with fertile soil, adequate moisture, and warm temperatures. There, pine seedlings lose out to broadleaves, whose seedlings quickly develop the broadleaves through which we name them, shading out the pines. As a result, pines have become specialists in places without the ideal conditions. Pines grow in extreme environments, cold, high places, almost deserts, sand and rock. Pines also grow with fire. Fire shows off their diversity. There are many and varied pine adaptations to fire. Some pines go through a grass stage, spending several years looking like tufts of grass while their root systems grow strong, and only then shooting up like crazy things until their buds might get above the coming flames. Some pines develop such thick bark and high crowns that everything can burn around them without giving them more than a scar. Other pines burn like matches. but have ways of ensuring that their seeds will be the first to sprout on the burned earth. Some store seeds for years in cones that open only in fire. Those seeds will be the first to hit the ashes. Pines live in extreme environments because of the help they get from mycorrhizal fungi. Fossils have been found from 50 million years ago that show root associations between pines and fungi. Pines have evolved with fungi. When no organic soil is available, fungi mobilize nutrients from rocks and sand, making it possible for pines to grow. Besides providing nutrients, mycorrhizae protect pines from harmful metals and other root-eating fungi. In return, pines support mycorrhizal fungi. Even the anatomy of pine roots is formed in association with fungi. Pines put out short roots, which become the site of mycorrhizal association. If no fungi encounter them, the short roots abort. In contrast, fungi do not cover at least the tips of anatomically different long roots specialized for exploration. By moving across disturbed landscapes, pines make history, not only through their association, but only through their association with mycorrhizal companions.
Pines have made alliances with animals as well as fungi. Some pines are completely dependent on birds to spread their seeds, just as some birds are completely dependent on pine seeds for their food. Across the Northern Hemisphere, jays, crows, magpies, and nutcrackers have a close association with pines. Sometimes the relationship is specific. The seed of high-altitude whitebark pines are the key food of Clark's nutcrackers. In return, the uneaten seed caches of the nutcrackers are the only way the pines spread their seeds. Caches of small mammals, such as chipmunks and squirrels, also play an important role in spreading pine seeds, even for those pines whose seeds are also spread by wind. But no mammal has spread pine seeds more widely than human beings. Humans spread pines in two different ways: by planting them and by creating the kind of disturbances in which they take hold. The latter generally occurs without any conscious intent. Pines like some of the kinds of messes humans make without trying. Pines colonize abandoned fields and eroded hillsides. When humans cut down the other trees, pines move in. Sometimes planting and disturbance go together. People plant pines to remediate the disturbances they have created. Alternatively, they may keep things radically disturbed to advantage pine. This last alternative has been the strategy of industrial growers. Whether they plant or merely manage self-seeded pine, clear cutting and soil breaking are justified as strategies to promote pine. In some of the most extreme environments, pine wants not just any fungal partner, but matsutake. Matsutake secretes strong acids that break down rock and sand, releasing nutrients for the mutual growth of pine and fungus. In the harsh landscapes where matsutake and pine grow together, there are often few other fungi to be found. Besides, matsutake forms a dense mat of fungal filaments, excluding other fungi and many soil bacteria. Japanese farmers and following them, scientists call this mat shiro, a castle. And thinking of Matsutake's castle allows us to imagine its wards and guards. Its defense is also offense. Offense. The mat is water repellent, allowing the fungus to concentrate the acids it needs to break down rock, together turning rock into food. Matsutake pine alliances stake out places with little organic soil.
Yet, in the ordinary course of events, organic soil piles up over time through the growth and death of plant and animal life. Dead organisms rot, becoming organic soil. Oh, sorry, did you already read this, Izzy? Oh, sorry if I'm repeating this. Dead organisms rot, becoming organic soil, which in turn becomes the ground for new life. In places without organic soil, this cycle of life and death has been broken by some contingent action. Such action signals irreversible time, that is, history. By colonizing disturbed landscapes, Matsutake and pine make history together, and they show us how history making extends beyond what humans do. At the same time, humans create a great deal of forest disturbance. Matsutake pines and humans together shape the trajectories of these landscapes. Kinds of human disturbed landscapes produce most of the Matsutake world trade. First, there are industrial pines and some other conifers in wood-producing forests. Second, there are peasant landscapes where farmers have cut back broadleaf trees, sometimes denuding hillsides completely, advantaging pine. In peasant forests, pine often grows together with oak and oak relatives, and these are Matsutake hosts in some place. This chapter goes on to tell of an industrial forest where pine grows without other trees. Here, histories in the making involve all the apparatus of capitalist wood production, not only property, but also the booms and busts of the logging industry and of labor, as well as the state apparatus of regulation, including fire suppression. The next chapter moves to interactions between pine and oaks in peasant forests. Together, they show histories made in concert by humans, plants, and fungi.
Humans and pines, with their mycorrhizal allies, have about the same length of history in Finland. As soon as the glaciers retreated some 9,000 years ago, both humans and pines started coming. From a human point of view, that was a long time ago, hardly worth remembering. Thinking in terms of forests, however, the timeline from the end of the Ice Age is still short. In this clash of perspectives, we see the contradictions of forest management. Finnish foresters have come to relate to forests as stable, cyclical, and renewable, yet the forests are open-ended and historically dynamic. Birch was the first tree to arrive after the glaciers, but pine was close behind. Pine, with its fungi, knew how to handle the piles of rock and sand the glaciers left behind. Only one pine came, Scots pine, Pinus sylvestris, with short, bristly needles and red-brown bark. Behind birch and pine straggled other broadleafs, but most never made it to the far north. Finally, Norway spruce arrived, the latecomer. For those of us used to temperate or tropical forests, this is a very small number of trees. In Lapland, among forest-forming trees, there is one pine, one spruce, and two kinds of birch. That's all. It's from the perspective of this small species count that the time of the glacier seems so near. Other trees have not yet arrived. The forests might seem predestined for an industrial monocrop. Many stands were just one kind before they were managed. Yet people in Finland have not always valued the sameness for the forest. Through the beginning of the 20th century, Swidden fir-based shifting cultivation was a common practice. Through it, farmers converted forests into ashes for their crops. Swidden created pastures and uneven aged broadleaf copses. It stimulated forest heterogeneity. This uneven peasant forest was one of the admired forms of nature-loving 19th century artists. Meanwhile, masses of pines had been cut to produce tar for a maritime capitalism that sourced its products from all over the world. The story of a micromanaged Finnish forestry begins not with the longue durée of forest form, but with the anxieties of an emerging crop of 19th century experts. A German forester's 1858 report is downright belligerent. The destruction of forests in which the Finns have become adept is furthered by the careless and uncontrolled grazing of cattle, swidden practices, and destructive forest fires. In other words, these three means are used for the same main aim, namely the destruction of the forests. The Finns live in and from the forest, but out of stupidity and greed, like the old woman in the fairy tale, they kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. In 1866, a comprehensive forestry law was passed and forest management began.
It was not until after World War II, however, that Finland became a vast terrain of modern silviculture. Two developments turned all attention to timber. First, more than 400,000 Karelians came over the border from the Soviet Union after Finland ceded Karelia. After the war, they needed housing and amenities, and the government built roads and opened up the forest to settle them. The roads made logging possible in new areas. Second, Finland agreed to pay $300 million to the Soviet Union in reparations for the war. Timber seemed just the way to raise the money and jumpstart Finland's post-war economy. Big companies got involved in managing timberlands, but most of Finland's forests continue to be owned by small holders, and the commitment of the populace to timber as the quintessential Finnish product has helped make scientific forestry a national cause. Forestry associations came to be ruled by national standards. Those standards enshrined the forest as a constant cycle of renewable timber, a static and ever sustainable resource. History making would be for humans alone. But how does one stop a forest in its tracks? Consider the pines. As fungi mobilize more nutrients and organic matter accumulates, the northern soils compact and sometimes become waterlogged. Spruce are likely to come in under pine, and as the pines die, succeed them. Forest management has determined to stop this process. First, there is clear cutting, which foresters call even-aged management. In Finland, clear cutting aims to mimic the effects of forest fires that replaced whole stands of trees every century or so in the boreal forest before humans stopped them. Pines come back after big fires because they know how to use bright open spaces in bare soils. Similarly, pines colonize clear cuts between clear cuts, and there are several rounds of thinning. Between clear cuts, there are several rounds of thinning, which weed out other species, as well as ensuring an open forest for fast pine growth. Decaying wood advantages spruce seedlings, so dead wood is cleared away. Finally, after the harvest, stumps are removed and the ground is harrowed to break up the soil, advantaging a new generation of pine. Through these techniques, foresters aim to create a cycle of renewal in which only pine participates, even when it isn't planted. Such techniques are gaining critics in Finland and elsewhere. Even pine forest critics remind us we're not so homogeneous in the past. Foresters respond defensively, touting the biodiversity they foster. Ginomitra brain mushrooms are a popular edible in Finland, although considered poisonous in the United States. Pop up in brochure after brochure as an icon of this biodiversity. Ginomitra often fruits in the disturbed soil that follows clear cuts. What might Matsutake add to this conversation? The most curious thing about Matsutake in northern Finland is its boom and bust habit of fruiting. Some years the ground is covered with Matsutake mushrooms. Then in the following years, no Matsutake will fruit at all. In 2007, a nature guide in Rovaniemi on the Arctic Circle claims to have personally found 1,000 kilograms of Matsutake. He heaped it into a great pyramid or left it lying in the ground. The next year he found nothing, and the following year only 1 or 2 caps. This fruiting habit resembles what for trees is called masting, in which trees allocate resources for fruiting only sporadically, but then, triggered by long-term cycles and environmental cues, fruit massively and altogether across an area. Masting refers to more than tracking weather changes from year to year. It requires multi-year strategic planning so that carbohydrates stored up one year might be expended in later fruiting. Furthermore, mast fruiting occurs in trees with mycorrhizal partners. The storage and expenditure necessary for masting appears to be coordinated between trees and their fungi. Fungi store carbohydrates for future fruiting of trees. Might trees also accommodate the uneven fruiting of fungi? I know of no research that tracks how fungal fruiting is coordinated with tree masting, but there is an enticing mystery there. Might the boom and bust fruiting of Matsutake tell us about the historicity of pine forests in northern Finland?
Pines in northern Finland do not produce seed every year. Foresters recognize this as a problem for forest regeneration. It is not always possible to expect clear cuts to bounce back immediately into forests, despite the fact that when pines do produce seed, they produce a great deal. In northern Sweden, researchers have noted wave-like and episodic regeneration in pine forests, even without fire. Seed production histories become forest histories through scarce or abundant seedlings. Surely, mycorrhizal partners must have a hand in the timing of pine seed production. Fungal fruiting may be one indication of such complex rhythms of coordination in which pine and fungus share resources for phased periodic reproduction. This is a time scale humans can understand. Certainly, we might say, pines have covered new territory since the retreat of the glaciers, but that is too slow to make a difference to us. But the historical patterns of forest regenerations are another matter. We know this kind of time. It does not follow the predictable cycles desired by forest managers. It is evidence of the strain between the eternal cyclical forests desired by managers and actually existing historical forests. Irregular fruiting offers a not so cyclical rhythm, responding to cross-year environmental differences and multi-year coordination between fungi and trees. To specify these rhythms, we find ourselves speaking in dates, not cycles. 2007 was a good year for Matsutake in northern Finland. In the coordination between fungal and host tree fruiting, we might begin to appreciate the history making of the forest, that is, its tracking of irreversible as well as cyclical time. Irregular rhythms produce irregular forests. Patches develop on different trajectories, creating uneven forest landscapes. And while forceful management against irregularity can drive some species to extinction, it can never succeed in transforming trees into creatures without history. Most mushrooms in Finland are picked in privately owned forests. However, many people besides the owners have access to those mushrooms. Pickers are allowed access to private forests under ancient common law. Whoa. Jokamienoikeus. That's a Finnish word, really. Translated into English as every man's rights. As long as one does not disturb residents, the forest is open for hiking and picking. Similarly, state forests are open to pickers. This expands the terrain in which foragers get to know mushrooms. One day, my host took me to a forest reserve where we looked at pines with 300-year-old fire scars. The trees were perhaps 500 years old. New research suggests that there were many areas in the boreal forest where stand replacing fires were rare and old trees flourished. Under the trees, we picked mushrooms and spoke of those that do not flourish with the younger forest of modern timber management. But Matsutake is lucky. Japanese researchers suggest that Matsutake fruits best, at least in central Japan, with 40 to 80-year-old pines. There is no reason that Finnish Lapland's managed pines, planned for 100-year harvest, would not be thick with Matsutake. The fact that in many years they are not is itself a gift, an opening to the temporal irregularity of the histories forests make. Intermittent, spasmodic fruiting reminds us of the precarity of coordination and the curious conjunctures of collaborative survival. In the dilemmas generated by modern forestry's stop history efforts, conservationists have come to believe that forests need refugia for management. But these refugia will have to be managed if they are to survive. Perhaps one skill for the Zen art of managed non-management will be to watch pine's partners rather than pine.
Thanks, everybody. I think now we'll go into some breakout rooms to discuss tonight's question. So again, I'll just repost it. And this is just a guiding question, but anything else that comes up that's a burning question or thought is always welcome. But it's, what are examples you've seen of sporadic cycles of landscape, like pine seed and Matsutake fruiting? So again, kind of how Singh in this chapter talked about, one year there was over 1,000 kilograms of Matsutake, but then the next there were none, and years following maybe 1 or 2. And same thing with pine seeds. Some years there's an abundance and other years there's not. So Jen, do you want to break us out?
Yep, I will send you all into the rooms now. We'll be there about 6 minutes and then I'll close it out and then we'll all come back to a larger discussion. You guys did see the message, right? Because you were all in my room. So I just want to make sure that something popped up.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Well, I did.
I bent into my room.
We're all in the same group.
And then I was like, I'm back.
Cool. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know if we want to, maybe a couple people share what they were talking about in their groups.
Sure, happy to share. Yeah, we kind of jumped from one place in the world to another. We went to Italy and talked about porcini and gandolini. What were they called?
They're called giallini.
Giallini.
Like
Giallini.
little yellow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, Stefano shared about his experience with picking mushrooms in the Alps, the Dolomites, and we talked about mangoes in India. I mean, yes, in India, and their relationship with mycorrhizal fungi and how that improves their flavor and their sweetness. Talked about avocados in Central America that grow there naturally, and sort of the masting that they do, where there's bumper crop years and years where there's very few. And we talked about morels up in Oregon, and also the ones that have recently been found in LA. So it was great. We kind of bounced around the world and talked about different crops.
In our space, we talked about the book Finding the Mother Tree, and about the idea that the death of one thing is the beginning of life for another. And by association, this idea of succession, forest, and sporadic growth is a non-human cyclical rhythm, which also kind of brought up our way that human history is a constructed history rather than a natural history. And so I think that kind of, we talked also a little bit about how much we think of as nature is actually not, but actually the human hand has been in it, and specifically looked a bit about the pine trees' success at surviving in Mediterranean climates. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're from Mediterranean climates everywhere, that they appear to be mostly from North Africa and brought through Roman Empire, and before that Greek Empire, throughout the Mediterranean, because we needed, before oil, wood for fuel. So the idea of how what we think of as nature was a kind of empire building strategy.
Awesome. We talked about olive trees in the high desert, and their kind of sporadicness in their fruiting. We also talked about the formation of flowers into certain geometric patterns, like hearts or circles, that are, we think, not manicured by humans, and kind of like what is the sort of driving force behind those things, and speculating on maybe it has something to do with pollinators, or maybe it's a microorganism guiding that kind of thing, and it's sort of beyond our understanding. And I also talked about morel mushrooms. Like at the studio, we've seen some, but this year there haven't been any. But the year before, they were all over the edge of the property. And then also the bioluminescent algae that form in the ocean that seem to I don't think they're there every year, but seems to have years where they go buck wild, and it's beautiful and kind of trippy and unreal. But then, yeah, I don't remember that happening every year. So very interesting.
Well, I think that is the abbreviated version of the breakout room. So now we can open it up to people in the breakout rooms to fill in where Jaime, James, and I might have forgotten um, something. Like I know, Ansu, you had brought up was it the Zapata in the ocean? Can you remind us?
I'm not sure. I think I meant cicadas.
Cicadas, yeah. The 17-year cycle.
And this year they're supposed to be coming out in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so I see all these articles about how people should harvest and toast and eat the cicadas.
Oh my God.
But I was there once when the cicadas awoke after their incredibly long period of dormancy, which I say incredibly long as if 17 years were a blip in human history. But they're fascinating, and they do make you feel connected to a longer history of the earth, for sure. That just such a stunning, unlikely thing for this insect that looks so odd to emerge from the ground from larvae after 17 years.
So, I mean, I'm assuming that you know that it's not like there's a 17-year period where they don't come out, because they're all on different cycles. So they come out almost every year, but it just depends on where and which variety, I guess.
Some years in which, yeah, they're very pronounced.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived there for a long time, so I know they come back. You can hear them anyway, but not see them in that quantity in different.
Because 17 years always happens like every year. It's like, I thought I was 17, but it happened last year.
Different populations.
Izzy, which life formation thing were you referring to?
We were talking about certain plants being like, or maybe flowering in certain patterns.
Sure.
I just was a little, I want to know more.
Yeah. Let's see.
No, that was me.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it, Patricia?
So in the spring in Missouri, in my yard, I get these purple flowers and white flowers, little, clover, and I forget what the purple one was, but sometimes they'd be in circles. They'd come in a pattern of a circle. I'm sure some of you had seen that before, right? Where you see white flowers in different shapes, but they're usually in circles. Has nobody seen that?
I've seen that. Yeah.
Are you from the Midwest? Who said that?
I'm not from the Midwest. No.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, you see it a lot. I mean, so I don't know if it's following like a mycorrhizal connection or how that patterning comes about, but I'll look it up and see if I can find something.
Yeah, what came to mind when James shared that was like crop circles. So that's where I was at.
One thing that came to mind for me through the reading and also through some of the discussion in our room was not only the role of human involvement, but also the interconnectedness of a variety of species. Some of the pine cones only being able to germinate their seeds through the help of birds or fire, and the important role of the mycorrhizal companions to the trees that really support and sustain the whole system. It seems like this reading today illustrated how nothing exists in isolation, and the role that we have also as part of that system, for better or worse, and our opportunity, I think, to choose the level of, I guess, change that we introduce consciously or not.
Yeah, I think Singh coins it really well. Interspecies entanglement, which I really love. I love the part entanglement in that. I think that's great.
But not in a negative way. It's like entanglement almost takes on a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, like wrap me up, entangle me, please. Like it's acknowledging the interdependence. Yeah, definitely not in a negative connotation.
An embrace.
One of the things that is brought up in the book is the relationship of white bark pine with Clark nutcracker, and that's one that's really close to home for me. Up in the mountains here in the Sierra Nevada, that relationship is really active, and on almost all the hikes that I do, I see the white barks and I see the nutcrackers, and I kind of watch them do their thing and aware of that relationship. It's really cool.
I wanted to add about pines that they, and Lauren's point about the establishment of pines all over different places, they actually spawn different like ecological niches for different creatures. And one of the ones that I thought connected to this conversation about flowers as well was a unique, I think it's California indigenous plant called the snow plant, which is a bright red, like cylindrical, conical growth that comes right out of the ground. And it's like shockingly, startlingly scarlet in the middle of a pine forest. And turns out it has no chlorophyll. It doesn't photosynthesize. It's a flower that oddly looks like a cone, and it comes out of the ground, and it actually feeds on a fungus left by the pine dust, is what I understand. Its biological name is Sarcodes sanguinea, I think. And it's just one to look up. It's fascinating, but just happens that there are tons of these clumps of flowers that really don't look like any flowers I've ever seen. They look like a cross between a cactus and a cone, and they're bright red on the pine forest floor.
I think one of the other things that I really loved about this week's chapter was Singh's acknowledgement of non-human things to their ability to make history, and particularly how impressive the history-making abilities of non-human fungi, bacteria, plants, other animals, how impressive those abilities can be, particularly obviously with this chapter is pine. But also that another one that comes, in that case, that comes up for me is mycorrhizal fungi at large, their history, their ability to change history on Earth, which is comes from the reason why 90% of all plants host mycorrhizal fungi, is that when the asteroid that spurred the extinction of the dinosaurs hit the Earth, it blew all this dust into the atmosphere for several years. And scientists always wondered how plants were able to survive without sunlight. And the only way was that the only plants that survived were the ones that formed these relationships with underground fungi. And they, through cooperation, kept each other alive through this time. And so that's like such an impressive feat, and why 90% of all plants still hold that very ancient relationship.
And then James or anybody here that would like to elaborate on it, I'm curious to understand better what the use of the word history. I mean, what I'm imagining with the use of the word history is that they're able to, these landscapes, these beings, whether it's pine and mushrooms together, are able to sort of move move a landscape from one phase into another, or they're kind of like, it's like there's a progression that, in a sense, I guess is historical. Is that how you understand the use of the word history as well, or plants and animals being history making beings?
I think that's the way I would, I would agree with that, their abilities to influence changes over time in landscapes that either, in this case, disturb them or come into disturbed environments. At least for me, that's what I think of history. I don't know what other people think.
I mean, more generally, I think we just probably are at a time when we have to interrupt the epistemology of all of these subjects that we discreetly put into science and history and things like that, because in a sense, what history leads us, what we're learning is that the nature of this like complex being that's so interrelated and communally created over time is not just in the past, but it also is now. It's cyclical, but not predictable. And it's a sort of state in which we are. It's not as if we have a God's eye to be able to say, this is sort of like the path. It's in a linear sense. It's sort of, we are also living history now. And this kind of makes me think about how we've tried to put order. I think I feel like I'm repeating what the reading said. Like, we've tried to put order and hierarchy and simplify and conceptualize and understand into our filters what this whole complex universe and Earth history is through a construct called history, when perhaps the only thing we can do that's sane is to live in a certain way that is conscious of that process in which we are now living. In other words, we can't really objectify the trajectory as much as history would imply. And that makes me also think of the difference between sort of indigenous knowledge systems, which create knowledge through practice, as opposed to knowledge that's sort of, held as static, but knowledge as lived practice, and learning from the ancestors what worked in a specific place, empirical observation, and never sort of having mastery and control over the process.
Yeah, and so so much of what you said echoed with me and resonated with me, and I wanted to go back to James trying to sort of tease out the different aspects of entanglement and how we are inevitably, like unequivocally entangled with each other. That's and we're entangled through time as well. But I think Singh really brings out how there can be entanglement and even invasion and resilience without hegemony, because our natural world goes through so many of these motions. It's just without that hierarchical structure and without hegemony. It does it because it's tuning into the journey of survival rather than trying to acquire power. And that really is what makes the difference, because that brings about a type of resilience or a type of entanglement where it's an entanglement of connection rather than an entanglement to propagate power or to propagate wealth, to propagate control. Really, this is about propagating life rather than a controlled life.
Yeah, I love that, and I love what Singh kind of says to speak about at least Pine's history, and like Pine being a very resilient example, and the things that come along with Pine and help it, but that modern forestry tries to basically put a stoppage on organisms, particularly Pine's ability to make history, to change. And they can try that, but they can never strip them of being historical agents. And I thought that was like very beautiful in that sense of like resilience and resistance to being controlled.
And I think also when you look at extractive economies, they don't recognize the connected nature of the tree to the mycorrhizal fungus. It just looks at the tree and what can be harvested from the tree, isolating that portion from the system instead of taking a view of the whole. And I think when you start to take a view of the whole, it makes it harder to justify those actions that reduce components to commodities and strip them out of that system.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why Matsutake as a symbol and a protagonist of the story like really fits, is like a rebuttal to that kind of like you were saying, the like a reduction of things and to capital and to money, which is that Matsutake has its own life cycle. We can't intentionally grow it. We kind of grow it because we disturb things. But ultimately, like there is no consistency in how Matsutake grows. So the people that live off of harvesting Matsutake and mushrooms that are like it also kind of exist outside of this like managerial extractive industry, like, or at least the attempt to put itself in that framework. So it's, yeah, it's, I guess I think Singh calls it the third nature, the things that grow despite capital and that kind of management.
Well, that the mushroom itself, through those acids that are mentioned in the text, creates conditions for the development of fertile soil where there's just bare rock. It seems like there's a profound generosity in that of the mushroom giving back.
Kind of want to go back for a minute to Jaime's question about history, and you know, sort of bring up the title of the book about the mushroom at the end of the world and what lives in the ruins that capitalism has made, and to kind of bring up a word that she uses over and over again about the idea of precarity. And I think she's making a claim to let go of history because history gives us a rationale for a linear approach to an idea of place or culture or civilization, and that we're going through a time where precarity is necessary for us to embrace collective precarity. Means that we can really begin to, in a way, erase the grip that history has had on our notion of ourselves and begin to replace it with something new that needs to be hatched in this particular moment in time.
I think that's such a liberating and optimistic idea. And in the text, it struck me as well the thought that while there's human history that's perceived by a human observer, there's also the natural history of the forest itself, but neither is static, and that you have the changes and the layers of development that lead to a complex ecosystem that, despite what may at a certain point in history look like a monoculture, is actually far, far more complex.
I read something this week about the what was published recently by the National Academy of Sciences by a team of like 18 different geographers and anthropologists and historians. They've looked at maps and found that 3/4 of the Earth's surface had been sort of actively mediated by human hands for 12,000 years. And so going back to the glacial period, it said more than 95% of temperate region forests and more than 90% of tropical forests have actually been handled by humans. They were always living in interaction. And so everything that we see today is like a heritage of that, quote, history. It's just something that we can't really separate. But to look at how they were able to do it in a way without destroying it, the forest, is so instructive as well.
I kind of wanted to read a footnote that speaks to this idea of history, I think, in a really nice way, if that's okay. As long as one does not get stuck in their stereotypes, it is possible to mix mythology and history. History is not just national teleology. Mythology is not just eternal return. To become entangled in history, one does not have to share a cosmology. Renato Rosaldo and Richard Price offer examples of the interweaving of varied cosmologies and world-making practices in making history. Morton Peterson shows histories in the making of cosmology. Many others, however, emphasize contrasts between mythology and history. By limiting the meaning of history through this contrast, however, they lose the ability to see the hybrid, layered, and contaminated cosmologies of any history in the making, and vice versa.
Hi y'all, it's Carolina. So I'm actually really glad that you read that footnote because it's helping me elaborate this thought that I've had in my brain for a minute. So I didn't have the book, but I was hearing y'all read it. And the whole time I was just like, this is fucking amazing. And it sounded to me like this huge and beautiful story of resistance and a collaboration of resistance, right? She uses as an example the pine tree and the oak teaming up in collaboration to talk to each other about how to grow. And we know that those systems of communications are still in place in our natural life. However, you know, as the author writes about this disruption, I think about the imbalance that we are all going through in a hyper-capitalist world, tying it into, you know, I think the focus, are we able to grow from that destruction of capitalism? And I think that, you know, this story of resistance between the oak or amongst the oak and the pine really speak to that and offer like not an alternative, but an actual knowledge, wisdom into how to be able to actually live. And to live, there must be a death, a complete disruption. However, the disruption as capitalists have built is a complete imbalance. That's the example of an imbalance, right? And we see now like our Mother Earth suffering. We're all struggling and resisting through a pandemic. That's another fucking point of imbalance. So it's just imbalance after imbalance of imbalance. And there's no true cosmological balance between life and death. Like, that process isn't natural anymore. So because that process isn't natural, there's just destruction. And I believe in our group, Ansu John, I really like how, well, the way that you use the words beyond fathom was like the complete great description to what this hyper-capitalist world is at now. So yeah, just like uplifting cosmology and ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom as universal truth. So I'm gonna be getting the book and I will definitely be joining y'all next time. Thank you.
Was it Izzy that read the quote?
Yes, I read the quote.
Do you mind giving us some context where you got that from? And, and why mythology?
It's a footnote to the beginning of the chapter. It's the first footnote. And it's when she's talking about, I can find the correlating text. The correlating passage is, history is both a human storytelling practice and that set of remainders from the past that we turn it to stories. Conventionally, historians look only at human remainders such as archives and diaries, but there is no reason not to spread our attention to the tracks and traces of non-humans, as these contribute to our common landscapes. Such tracks and traces speak to cross-species entanglements in contingency and conjuncture, the components of historical time. To participate in such entanglement, one does not have to make history in just one way. And that's where she places the footnote, which then I think that's where she starts talking about how, and then she says, as long as one does not get stuck in their stereotypes, it's possible to mix mythology and history. But not falling into these history as national teleology and mythology as eternal, nearly eternal return, but rather a cosmology of both history and mythology that are layered, hybrid, contaminated. That's the context.
Well, I understand the quote now. It just bothered me because I think there's a lot of nationalism associated with created histories and then mythologies that are created to support histories. And maybe that's a different sense of mythology, but there is myth making around the natural world, I think, that helps us understand history as well. So maybe it was used in that sense.
I think she kind of, what is the phrase is like national teleology, which is like, I think I get what you mean about like, I think that's more like a story, a way of synthesizing like what a nation is supposed to do, like teleology meaning the purpose of something. Whereas I think she's, yeah, using myth in a different way from that. And I think national teleology is a really good way to put what like nationalist movements do to weave stories that sort of divide themselves from the rest of the world.
Right, agreed.
What came to mind for me when reading that passage was this book called Historical Metaphors and Mythical Realities. It's a short anthropological essay on Captain Cook's arrival to Hawaii and how Captain Cook's arrival was in alignment with a ceremonial, like a traditional ceremonial celebration. I haven't read the book in a while, but I believe it's for Pele and like this war between gods. And they saw, according to this anthropological historian's recounting of the story as one that's both historical and mythological, the alignment of Captain Cook's arrival with this myth led to his first time being accepted, second time like and celebrated, and then eventually leading to his death, because that is what happens in the myth. And so it's interesting because I guess this book just shows how like the history and the metaphor inform each other simultaneously. It like the mythology and the history inform each other into like this metaphorical reality. And I could kind of see how that plays out with like, I don't know, I'm actually going on a rant and I should stop, but that's kind of where I saw like, okay, I'm just gonna stop now. Sorry.
You're good, please don't be self-conscious. I'm following it at least.
I think it just makes me think of like, for example, when, you know, like there's historical and metaphorical play, mythological play, relationship at play, but at the same time, for example, like when we were reading some of the Rebecca Solnit about how these landscapes appeared as sparse or barren. So then that actually led to the reification, or the like, it led to the actual affirmation of making those landscapes barren through nuclear testing on these barren patches of land. Or for example, like with Los Angeles being referred to as a desert, when in actuality, it's wasn't ever really necessarily a desert, but maybe now is becoming this metaphor or myth of it as a desert is now being actualized through the way we are treating the land. So the reinforcement between these two and the flux, I guess.
Right, and I thought that was a dangerous, that has been a dangerous conflation, you know, this blurring between myth making and history. And so that's why I wanted to see how she used it in this context in a positive way, almost.
I would say that's a decolonized way of understanding history, because you're not like there's no erasure of the myth, but there's also a scientific approach to the myth. So it's not a myth as we understand it. It's now a cosmology.
And perhaps history is inadequate to grasp our story, and perhaps myth is the way that we can fully sort of absorb the complexity of our story, and maybe that's part of it as well. I'd like to check out this book that you dropped in the chat, Historical Metaphors and Mythical Realities. That's very intriguing. Thanks for introducing that.
Yeah, it's a really nice book. The author, I'm Hawaiian. The author's not Hawaiian, but I would recommend the text. It's not too like anthropologically colonial.
Yeah, I think just kind of reaffirming the need for the synthesis of both history and myth, or at least at this point, you know, not the inclusion of mythology. Because Singh kind of points out both in human senses when we're looking at these forests, the only histories that are told are kind of the settler colonial history. And the need to include people beyond that, but also even with the telling the history of the plant life, where the forest itself, again, falls within this very sharp and boundary paradigm of science, and incorporating and acknowledging not only them as history makers, but also mythologies about mushrooms and trees and their origins and things like that, helps us grasp what we know for certain is a very entangled and interdependent reality, and that we can no longer just draw, you know, strings of the web out without pulling the rest of it with us. And mythology plays a huge role, I think, in understanding these kinds of things and understanding ourselves, where we are and where we've been and where we might go.
And throughout history, when we didn't have the benefit of electron microscopes and, you know, gene sequencing and those kinds of things, much less even a comparative look at distribution of plants across space, the way to understand the natural world was through the recounting of the human interaction with the natural world, and part of that had to be myth, because there was no way to record exactly what happened. So yeah, in that sense, I appreciate how myth is also a reality and a way of understanding. By the way, did anyone, or has anyone read more in the book to address what was the difference between the Russian and the Finnish part of the forest?
I've read the whole book, but I don't know if she elaborates it on much more, but it's more of a difference in style, I guess, of what the Finns currently believe is the right practice of forestry, right? Which is clearing debris, like making it extremely neat, which again, that kind of stuff favors pine, because if you leave debris, spruce starts to come up, and then spruce will shade out pines as they die, and then it will turn into a spruce forest. Whereas, I don't know why, but across the border, I don't think the Russian forestry has the same view, whereas their idea of forest management is to kind of just let debris be there, which are both equally, kind of valid ways of being. I mean, that's a really tricky question, I guess. But does that kind of answer the differences between them?
No, I was really curious because I don't have experience with this book, whether she touches on that and so thank you for that, because I do think, just from my experience of that Finnish Russian, the confrontation of different cultures there, that like the whole mentality is so unique and different. And as well, I wanted to ask you if there was any mention of the Sami people and the way that they handle the forests, if different from the sort of modern Finnish, well, let's say the Finnish state approach.
I don't believe the book talks about that. I think this is the only part where they talk about Finnish forestry. I think next they talk about sort of pine landscapes in sort of like peasant owned lands in Japan at different historical periods and their approach to it, which is contrasted with, like, I think this was like a evolution of like how like pine industrial plantation management came to be in Finland, whereas next chapter is kind of more of it's a different relationship. It's not necessarily about managing huge silviculture, managing huge amounts of trees for money per se.
Okay, it's really interesting because there's a lot in Russian culture, in music, in the songs, and just in their cinema and everything about and their culture about and food about for pine forests and about mushrooms. And so I would have loved to have seen a deeper treatment of that or comments.
Yeah, the book, I also am very interested in that. I think just the book covers such a wide area and scope of not only just life, pines, mushrooms, all these other things, but also different histories and different countries. And yeah, but that's very interesting because like I said, like the book was saying, that to get certain mushrooms with pines, the humans kind of have to consistently disturb the forest, which again is just this interesting point about a line between like an imbalance of disturbance versus like a disturbance as like accepting us as part of the world and part of participating in the change of life cycles in the same way that, you know, squirrels and beetles, like, and even parasitic mushrooms down forests, but with a purpose and not in a totally unbalanced, profit-driven extractive reason.
And maybe we're not any more important than the fungus or the squirrels or the beetle.
Totally.
Hey y'all, I have to go, but it was a really awesome space to be in on a Friday evening. I'm gonna keep an eye out for your next session. I'm not sure if it's the same book, but whatever book y'all read, I trust.
Yeah, we're reading this book for probably another, I think we're in week 3, right? So another 5 weeks, we're going to try to read through this book.
Sweet. I'll get my copy this week.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank y'all. Good night.
Would anyone like to share what they've been working on this evening? Melinda, I see you have a sewing machine.
I'm making a pillowcase for a buckwheat pillow for a friend of mine for her birthday.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
The pillowcase is in a got a kind of Rorschach to it.
Ooh.
I don't know if I can get it out here in time.
I love the colors.
Yeah, I hope she likes it.
I think she will. Well, I got a little bit further on mine. Surprisingly, it always is. I just did the pink tonight, and I thought I'd get so much further, but that's as far as I got.
It's tied in there. I'm doing that same one. I did green.
Oh, fun.
Lauren, you know that there were redwood trees in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Yeah, I had heard that. Yes.
Yeah. There's actually petrified redwood trees in a petrified redwood forest in Colorado.
Wow.
From like tens of thousands of years ago. You can still find a few redwoods back in there. I don't know if you have one on your property, but I think I remember seeing at least a couple when I was back there.
Yeah, we have 3 different redwoods there between my neighbors and I. You can see them connected too.
Mm. They make a circle?
Yeah, well, more like a triangle, but they definitely look like they're making a circle.
Connected, yeah.
I got a little bit farther on my underground. Oh, but the light's wrong. So let me see. Wait.
A little closer, but over to your right, I think. They were there.
There.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me pin that. Wow.
Love it.
Got a little further on my little bird. I just did some leaves.
Very nice.
I didn't quite realize my ambition to complete the bee, but I'm really, really close. I think next week.
Very nice. Is there any white in there?
There is. I was actually just adding a little, I don't know, there it is. I was adding a little highlight and then I regretted it. And then I was like, it's too entangled. I must continue. So
I've had some of those. Just keep going.
we'll see how it goes.
It's beautiful. It looks three-dimensional. Like really like it's popping off the
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to add some of this like lovely downy, I don't know what it's called on bees, like fluff. Is that the scientist, some scientist on the call? Is that the word?
Anybody want to see some moving mushrooms?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, lovely.
Are those oyster mushrooms? I think so, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are oysters.
Those are puffballs?
I think those were button mushrooms.
Button.
Well, I could watch these forever, but gotta end it somewhere. They're so fun.
There's one that I always want to show people, but it's a little it can be intense because I think it's from one of David Attenborough's documentaries, and it shows the entomopathic fungi that parasitize insects. And I think it actually ties in well with some of the themes of Singh's book about how things like pathogens or things that cause disturbance are ultimately part of like a larger cycle of balance and health in an ecosystem. But it's basically like that, but a time lapse of a bunch of mushrooms bursting out of like beetles and stuff like that. But I know some people can be a little queasy about bugs and stuff like that.
I think I have one of those lined up for
Okay, yeah.
future session. Well, shall we wrap it up for the night?
So, I'm definitely gonna sign up. I'm so hungry.
I have mushroom risotto waiting for me.
Oh,
No, no, you're lying. You
I
did?
made it. I
Really?
made it this afternoon.
Oh.
It was the
Well
the pack.
played.
It was the pack from Trader Joe's, but I figured it was going to be disappointing, and so I had dried mushrooms that I threw in there. And Lauren, skipping on the name now, amaranth leaves from the garden. I picked all the tops and basically sauteed them, and that stuff is really good. We're going to eat that next week when we're here with the students.
Now I'm super eager to come up there.
Mm.
Well, thank you everybody for a lovely evening. I got a lot out of tonight and got a lot out of the discussion. Very rich conversation.
Thank you, everyone. I'm signing off. Good night.
Good night, Ansu. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
bye, everybody.
Good night, James. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, Lauren.